Okay, everybody. Hello again. My name is Ralph Schultz, and I'm broadcasting from New Mexico, United States of America, and this is video number 5. Today we're going to cover pages 74 to 79 in my book, with topics are cyber war, Russian security, and past numerous Russian invasions. So what I want to say to my Russian friends is "Здравствуйте, как дела сегодня?" which means, hello, how are you? How's everything going today? Очень хорошо. Very good. So in Geneva, Switzerland, just quickly, I'll talk about that. There were talks yesterday, went on for 8 hours between the U.S. and the Ukraine. Not the Ukraine, excuse me, the U.S. and Russia. And nothing was resolved. They broke the ice a little bit. One of the problems, of course, is that there is a logjam regarding Ukraine membership into the into NATO. The Russians still insist upon not allowing that to happen, and the U.S. says, well, Ukraine can do whatever they want. We're not going to interfere with their ability to make choices. Okay, excuse me. So what was accomplished, though, there was the U.S. offered some openings for mutual cooperation. They basically said we could pull back our military exercises in Ukraine and cut them back, because they're scheduled, I think, like 20 next year, and some are sizable, and pull back any missile ships and so on from the Black Sea, Russian borders, and not put any new missiles or troops and so on into any adjacent countries besides the Ukraine, like Poland and so on. So the U.S. is willing to basically draw back what might be deemed aggressive behavior. Not entirely, I guess, because there's still the possibility that still will produce some exercises and things, but diminish it considerably. And that is something Russia has asked for. But unfortunately, the issue of Ukraine and NATO is unresolved. It's a log jam that we'll see how that transpires in the next 2 meetings. Tomorrow there's a meeting in Brussels Brussels, Belgium, between Russia and NATO, and then there's another one a few days later with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. It's a peacemaking organization, and they monitor elections, and they've had people in the Donbass watching for conflict and so on. So we'll see what happens. Now we're going to I'm going to talk about pages 74 to 79, the history of this, as I usually do. Excuse me. And here we'll see very shortly on a picture of General Gerasimov, who is chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. He's in charge of the situation in the Ukraine and was also for Crimea. He's on page 77 in my book. And on page 137 in my book, there's a picture of General Mattis, who was Secretary of Defense for the U.S. 2017 to 19. So have a look. And near the end of the book, I'll have a listing of all the invasions that have occurred into Russia for the last few hundred years. Give you a feeling of why they are very cautious. Okay, and the time after that, next week, we'll have video 6. It'll be about the Ukraine, so that'll be interesting. And subscribe, please, because subscribers are starting to go up, but it's important for the success of this channel. Excuse me. See, when you work at home, things happen. It's not quite like on the network TV or the cable channels. So here we go. Starting on page, for those of you who may have the book, page 74. And the title of this section is Mutually Assured Cyber Destruction, or as I call it, hashtag MECD at Ralph Schultz. So you remember MAD, M-A-D, in the nuclear standoff with the Soviet Union? No one would launch nuclear missiles because it would cause a worldwide atomic catastrophe and destroy each other's countries. What's this tweet doing here? Just this. Today, August 2nd, it was in 2017, I thought this up. It struck me while watching the movie Snowden. Remember, he was the cyber genius working for the U.S. National Security Agency, collecting secret data, who turned it over to WikiLeaks and eventually fled and is living in Moscow the past 4 years under political asylum from Russia. Folks, we are at war with Russia and China and any other country or person who tries to hack into, interrupt, or shut down our communications and data networks. It doesn't matter which country starts it first. I believe at this moment, Russia and the United States are feverishly trying to hack into each other's databases to gather secret information and install viruses to disable programs and applications. Now remember, I wrote this 3 years ago. And at the same time trying to create cyber protective firewalls to prevent outside intrusions and maintain the integrity of their data. This is a 24/7 all-out endless race. It's been said that Russia hacked into Estonia's major data and interrupted transmissions. The U.S. evidently did the same to Iran, and someone recently attacked Ukraine. This is in 2018 or 19. North Korea disrupted Sony Corp's U.S. operations. I read the USA recently tried to install a sleeper virus into Russian government files. This is about 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was Obama was still at the end of his term. So it could be, it might be, it will be. The technology to hack into U.S. personal files by Russia to influence U.S. elections is kid stuff next to what could be done now or soon, such as shutting down military command and control, satellites, just infrastructure in the U.S. Shut down the oil pipeline, remember that? Or electronic banking, who knows? So either way, to Russia or to the United States. A country, even just a few rogue hackers, could upset an entire nation's electrical grid, knock out all electronic financial data and the internet, cell phones, stop the operation of trains, planes, industrial factories, hospitals, distort data transmission of the U.S. Defense Department. This has to be developing, in my opinion. Ever been outside during a power shortage, crash during a rainstorm or heat wave? Everything at night is just totally black and nothing moves. You can't see more than 10 feet in front of your face. Now this technology must be kept at a parity, or else if some country really gets attacked and loses, it is left helpless. Now that is war without directly destroying any property nor people. So what I'm saying is this is really scary. The only solution, it seems to me, is to maintain good relations with other countries and to be transparent. The new Russian hybrid warfare strategy de-emphasizes extensive military conflict. The idea is to destabilize and discredit regions and countries with soft power like cyberspace and social media intrusion and influence, encouraging regional political unrest, perhaps a very limited military incursion, as in Georgia and the Ukraine in 2014, and that's if absolutely necessary to protect its borders. This creates some chaos and divisions and allows political groups to gain power that have favorable attitudes towards Russia. Of course, we've always wanted groups to have favorable attitudes towards the U.S. It also includes creating a strong, diversified economy in Russia. This type of conflict is not costly, it's flexible, and offsets foreign powers viewed as threatening. It neutralizes the gigantic U.S. military advantage. With a budget of now it's $780 billion versus Russia's, which is around $70 billion, $140 billion in purchasing power parity. Over a 10-to-1 difference in spending. Amazing. The Russians are being innovative and strategic. And as far as how the government and President Putin have managed their own country, Russia, dealt with internal political competitors, the media, their elections, it is not really, I don't think it's the business of the USA, the United Kingdom, or Germany to try and fix it their way. Deal on a nation-to-nation basis on foreign policy. If Russia didn't feel so isolated and fear the West's attitudes about it, perhaps much of the alleged Russian influence in cyber interventions would begin to abate. The U.S. NATO national security fear by Russia might be present even with the new government as long as Russia is viewed as a military threat. So how can a country, which they really aren't, they're not a threat to the United States or the United Kingdom, Germany. Now, how can a country that hosted this is a joke, Miss Universe contest be considered a threat? Donald Trump did that some time ago, way before he was president. Russia likes President Trump because he wants to find peaceful solutions to issues and open up commercial trade with Western Europe and the U.S. This has nothing to do with the current scandal in Washington back in 2018. I know a Russian lawyer and investment banker, Ilya, who is working diligently to encourage German business investment in Russia. He has Donald Trump's book, The Art of the Deal, on his desk. I saw it in a Skype video transmission to Moscow. IKEA, I-K-E-A, the Swedish household goods company, opened 5 large stores in Moscow not too long ago. Exxon has negotiated a $500 billion deal with the Russian national oil company Rosneft. I recommend allowing this joint venture as a sanctions exception. It would economically cement Russia and the United States and make future diplomatic and military confrontations less likely. Russia is the largest oil producer in the world, just ahead of Saudi Arabia, and both have a large surplus of oil, unlike the US, Europe, China, and Japan, all of which must import oil to meet their large domestic demand. USA, please let us try and figure out a way to initiate more peace and less militarism. We, the USA, have the world's biggest military at a yearly budget of $780 billion, China around $250 billion, Saudi Arabia $90 billion, Russia $70 billion in nominal terms. The USA military budget is larger than the rest of the entire world combined and the most modern and highly equipped with outstanding soldiers. This is not enough. My political leaders in Washington, are you really afraid of Russia? Let's be realistic with a balanced policy. And remember, Russia is the world's largest country in geographic size with 11 time zones. The mainland U.S. is 4. This makes it hard to manage without strong centralized controls. It is the world's 6th largest economy, about a $4 trillion gross domestic product when you measure it on a purchasing power parity basis, which is adjust for the cost of living and foreign exchange anomalies. Compared to the U.S. at number 2, about 20 trillion. China is number 1 on that basis, around 23 trillion. Russia is 48 times the geographic size of Germany. The Russian economy has some issues, but it does not have the high national debt problem as the U.S. and Europe, giving it financial staying power to sustain economic stress due to the 50% decline in the price of oil. But now, since that time, it's bounced back. It's back at $70, $80 in oil. Russia has money pouring in, very, like water over a dam. Okay, and so it has staying power, and it's developing new internal industries and creating trade relations with Asia and China. Russia has a total debt to gross domestic product ratio of around only 15%. The USA is now it's up to about 130%. Much of Europe is 60, 70, 80, 100% the size of their economy, that is their debt. And this is important because then you can sustain financial losses from the sanctions. And they also have $500 billion in foreign exchange reserves that in a sovereign wealth fund that can be used to fund the country in a crisis or to help with domestic programs, which I think they're doing. Okay, so new Russian military foreign policy based upon a defense of a perceived threat of aggressively imposed Western values and a weakening of Russian historical power and influence in the world is developing. Russia intends to claim its former status and respect. Remember, this is 3 years ago I wrote this. Remember, Russia fell apart after the 1992 demise of the Soviet state and it was considered to have lost the Cold War. But Russia did not see itself as defeated, as did the West, and was humiliated by the ascendance of the Western influence and control. So, Russia must preserve geopolitical influence on its borders in some of the former Soviet states and restore a sense of national dignity and high moral ground. That's how they feel about it. Western policy and attitudes towards Russia are in opposition to these goals and needs. There is no ideological divide, as during the Cold War, between communism and capitalism, and no reason by Russia to threaten to invade Europe to occupy other countries. Yet U.S. politicians and pundits insist upon calling Russia an existential enemy. In January 2018, the highly respected American magazine Foreign Affairs printed an article that implied Russia was now an enemy and needed to be considered as one. And that's a very sophisticated magazine journal read by all top-level U.S. political officials. The Russian Orthodox Church has resumed its former Soviet role as supporter of the Russian state. This is as in the pre-communist Tsarist era, going back several hundred years. Patriarch Kirill is presenting the clergy as chaplains of the new empire, espousing traditional Russian values of nationalism in a Slavic state headquartered in Moscow. This includes Ukraine and Belarus. The church supports current anti-Western attitudes. 80% of the Russian population identifies with the Russian Orthodox religion. I remember when I was there in 1968, all churches were shut by the Soviet government. This is a reversal towards the idea of imperialistic Russia. It supports a new Russian high moral ground superior to the secular consumerism of the West and its conflicted politics and extreme liberal acceptance of new social values. That's how Russia looks at it anyway. To summarize, Russia's perception of the imposition of destabilizing Western political liberalism into Russia and an aggressive military NATO expansionism combined with a new U.S. policy that considers Russia an enemy and a second-class country has resulted in new Russian defensive policies and encouraged the rise of Russian nationalism and a return to imperialistic Russian glory and international respect and influence. Remember what I just said. Reread it if you get the book. And political support of Russian minorities in former Soviet republics. Latvia is 1/3 originally born Russian. And rebuilding a strong modern military, Russia has certainly done that, and the building of a nationalistic unified state with limited managed democracy and a strong economy. The Kremlin admits Russia is different from liberal democracies and their economic political model is just as legitimate as that in the U.S., United Kingdom, or Germany. Russia is not going to duplicate them or move in that direction. Many of its citizens feel the same. I have heard them interviewed on the internet. I thought it was interesting to hear Russian leadership say they have a tightly controlled centralized state and be very proud of that heritage. Sure, there is a Western democratic liberal movement there, but it is mostly concentrated in their two main cities, Moscow and Petersburg. At least I'm led to believe that. And within the more highly educated Western-oriented population. Go further and further from these cities and you will see a very pro-United Russia. That's Putin's party. Communist and nationalistic political viewpoints and party affiliations. It's kind of like the USA regional split. Most of the population believes President Putin has been a great leader and brought back Russia to economic prosperity and worldwide power, prestige, and influence. Go and ask them. I think the embedded U.S. intellectual viewpoint about an eventual liberal Russia might be just U.S. political leadership kidding themselves. Maybe a Russia a little bit more flexible, but not much for a long time. And maybe a lot less flexible, especially if the West keeps pushing them. Russia is not perfect, and neither is the U.S. Just ask President Trump. In a recent Wall Street Journal dated March 18, 2018, it was stated young adults are pleased the Russian economy finally provides a variety of consumer goods and everyday freedoms the same as Europe. Some believe Putin has brought peace and stability to Russia, but there's also a large exodus of people in the 18 to 24 group. No, there is not an exodus. A lot of people say they would like to live and work outside of Russia. That's because there is not enough opportunity in their economy now, and that can be fixed, but that remains to be seen. And people can say that, but then when the time comes, they don't want to leave their homeland. Okay, so I will put up a list of countries that have successfully invaded Russia and occupied territory. And then next week we'll talk about the Ukraine. And we'll talk about the 2014 change in government. Some call it a coup. And when the time of troubles became, the modern time occurred, and it led to this day. So the Mongols, 1250 to 1450. Sweden, 1600s and 1700s. They got up to Moscow, the armies. Poland, up to Moscow with Lithuania in the 1600s. Occupied Ukraine's western region. Turkey won the Crimean War in 1856 with French and British support. Japan won the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, a major naval battle near Vladivostok. France, Napoleon invasion of Moscow, but Russian army did chase Napoleon and marched into Paris for briefly, believe it or not. World War I, German invasion, Russian army crumbled. World War II, German invasion up to Moscow. 30 million Russian/Soviets killed. The Russian Revolution and post-World War I Civil War lasted 3 years, and the USA, France, and British provided military support to the Mensheviks, which were called the Whites, the pro-Western liberal provisional government opposed by the Bolsheviks, later to establish the Soviet Union. That was 1919 and 1922. See the movie Dr. Zhivago. That's where it takes place, the time period. The Cold War, how many years was that? 50? And with the USA and Western Europe, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1992, and the USA considered itself victorious, but the Russians didn't look at it that way. Russia was exhausted from its arms race with the USA and their poorly functioning economy. U.S. military power encircled the Soviet Union on its borders, posing a constant dangerous threat. In the 1990s, the Russian army or economy collapsed, and military was underfunded and demoralized, and to graze into a weakened secondary power. Since 2000, the country has rebuilt itself into a major international power with a good market economy and a growing middle class, modern consumer economy similar to Eastern and Western Europe. They're restoring national unity, pride, and security. So, what's your opinion of Russian foreign policy, and why? I'm just trying to explain why Russia acts the way it does, and later I'll talk about China. It's very similar. So, that's it for now. Next week, Ukraine. Try to subscribe. I'm getting more subscribers. It helps. And I wish you all well. Thank you for watching.